What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's happening with the overall market moving forward, what's going on with the economic calendar, what you should be watching for as time progresses. But before I break down devil's information, before I break down all this information about the charts and the markets, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, deposit $100, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks, and the offer ends very soon in just about 3 weeks. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the market. Looking at SPY right now, we have a head and shoulders like structure that's starting to develop, and SPY was attempting to break out today, hitting 518 to 518.5. I called out 518.5 yesterday as the most likely possibility for SPY to be testing, and I told you to watch and see if we end up breaking it or not. And I called more upside potential as SPY is still green for the day. So I was correct about that move, and I did call out the top almost exactly. But I just want to make it very clear that SPY was not able to break past it, and we actually got a small rejection off of that. So the question is, will SPY continue to reject? Are we going to see more downside from here, or is something else going to shift? I want to provide more details about that a little bit later into this video. Let's talk about some news and stuff first before I break that down. So let me just mention that the Dow Jones has closed slightly higher and posted the longest winning streak since December 2023. Now, as great as that is, all good things must come to an end because temporarily the market is not looking as great, at least for the bulls. Now, the market's inching higher, but we're at some tight resistance. So we have to watch and see if there are any shifts or not. And looking at how things are looking, we had the 10-year Treasury yield drop 3 basis points to about 4.45%. And with that happening, this is what's helped the market kind of continue to push. Now, will the market end up dipping and see a big drop, or is it going to be like a small drop by like 5 to 7 points before we try to bounce? I'll talk more about that a little bit later on, but that's what I do see potentially happening. Let me also note that for tomorrow, it's going to be Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. That is very, very important because at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the wholesale inventories data, very, very minor data, nothing too crazy. And then later on during the day, between 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. is when we might see some more things that lead to volatility. But it's all kind of minor. So we first have Jefferson from the Fed giving a speech at 11 a.m. At 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the 17-week bill auction coming out. At 11:45 a.m., we have the Collins from the Fed giving a speech. At 1 p.m., we have the 10-year notes auction, and then we have Cook from the Fed giving a speech at 1:30 p.m. So it's all very minor data, nothing too crazy during that time frame, but that could lead to some volatility. Nothing too crazy, nothing compared to like CPI or PCE or FOMC, nothing compared to that. It's all very minor. Now, for more data involving the markets, I just want to call out that the fear and greed index is currently quite fearful, as fear is what's driving sentiments in the markets right now, as we're seeing some sellers beginning to come at least at these resistance levels. Market momentum is still greedy as we saw buyers stepping in already. So this is kind of a lagging indicator, but it still shows us that there were buyers before. They were pushing the market to greedy mode, but it could shift as we're at resistance. Then we also have the puts and call option positioning coming out. One thing worth noting is that right now, the market is fearful. So when you look at the charts, you can see that this is going up a little bit. We're starting to see this increasing because put buying is going up, call buying is starting to slow down a bit, and the ratio is shifting. There's a lot more shorts coming in. People are starting to short the market again. Sellers are returning, and they're starting to, shift sentiment right now, which is making things a bit more fearful. I also want to note that this overall ratio has a lot of significant bounces and rejections off the 0.8 area. This happened multiple times. And once we got to about 0.8 or very close to that range, we saw this come right back up, which shows us that some more sellers are stepping in. The last thing I'm going to mention from this chart would be the VIX. This is still at neutral. It has been dipping quite a bit. We're approaching some support around the very, very low 13s to 12s. That's where it loves to bounce. 12 tends to be the bottom, and then the very, very low 13s also tend to be bottoms. So we're approaching support. Are we going to get a temporary bounce on the VIX for now before we continue lower later? Or is the VIX about to make a big move to the upside? We'll just have to wait and see, but it could pivot very, very soon. For earnings, I just wanted to call this out. So in case you guys missed this chart, what you could do is take a screenshot of this if you are interested in basically capturing these earnings for the remainder of the week. If you want, you could. This is what the chart looks like. But anyways, going back, let me just call out that right here on Wednesday, before the market opens tomorrow, we have some important earnings. We have like Uber, Shopify, and just a few others like Toyota. And then for after the market close, we have ARM, Robinhood, Airbnb, and AMC. I know a lot of retail are going to be looking at this, and some more of those consumer discretionaries and more retail, if anything, are coming out for like the upcoming weeks. For Thursday, we have Roblox and a few others, and everything else is very minor in my personal opinion. But for today, what just came out is Rivian. So what happened with Rivian's earnings? Right now, they had very, very mixed reports, but overall not the best. So right here, they're saying that deliveries remained flat between Q4 and Q1 at 13,588 units, still up about 71%. However, their best-selling RS1 is their number one EV, selling at over $70,000. Q1 tends to be a down quarter for them historically, so that's something worth noting. Coming down to what we're actually seeing, when it comes to the results right here, they beat analyst expectations when it comes to revenue at $1.2 billion in revenue. Not bad whatsoever. However, their losses were wider than expected with a loss of $1.48 per share. So that's not the best of news for them. And then with that coming out, with their overall losses not being as great, their overall plants had a shutdown in April, which is now leading to them reopening in May 1st. And the last thing is their guidance was actually not bad, kind of close to expectations. They're expecting a slight gross profit in Q4 of this year. That is something else worth noting. So we'll see how things go for them. That's something I just wanted to mention. Right now, the next FOMC meeting is going to be in May, in mid June, excuse me, guys, mid June. And right now, the Fed is still expected to once again keep rates the same because inflation hasn't really subsided yet. We have to give it a little bit more time as things are still very sticky. So with that being said, let's break down what I see happening in the charts, what's going on with SPY, and how things are looking in my personal opinion. So as of right now, there is this head and shoulders like structure kind of developing on SPY. But when you zoom out of the chart and go to the daily time frame, you will notice that we are beginning to shift right here. So right here, let me actually break this down a little bit. We approached this high and we have a lot of gaps to fill. There's this first gap down here. There's another gap all the way down here into like the 511 area. We could see SPY reject and actually come down to fill at least one of these gaps before it tries to rebound. But if we see an even bigger pullback, it could even fill the second gap before it bounces. But I do anticipate that that's a strong possibility. Now, looking at the chart right here, the daily is looking a little bit weak after getting that rejection, and that is suggesting that there could be more downside coming. That is a strong possibility if we get a big candlestick right over here. On the QQQ, it's essentially the same thing, and I will go back and break down the levels after. I just want to talk about the daily charts real quick. But same thing on the QQQ. A little rejection here. We have this gap to fill, and there's another gap here. So this could be a signal we're about to reject looking at the daily. We came up to fill this imbalance. We actually filled it before we came back down. So we hit resistance before starting to turn. Notice that Apple's also looking kind of weak on the daily. Tesla, same thing, looking kind of weak right here. If we lose 175-ish around there, there's a big gap to fill all the way down to 169. So we have to be very, very careful right here. We have to be very, very mindful of this moving forward. So with that being said, guys, I want to make it very clear that the market has these gaps to fill below, and there is downside potential, in my personal opinion, looking at them. So be very, very mindful of that and be very, very careful. We're going to transition back to the hourly time frame on SPY and then start breaking down what I see happening right here. So for SPY, from what I'm seeing, there is a head and shoulders like structure that has developed right here. We have resistance currently at this. There's technically a very, very minor resistance at 517.5, but it's very minor. The stronger resistance has been 518 to 518.25 around. That's been the main resistance of the day. And so far today, we got 3 rejections on the hourly off that resistance. So it happened 3 times. We rejected, and it's really struggled to break through that level. So with this bearish divergence developing, this could be a turning signal. If this is also something like a head and shoulders and we fail to really break out, that is looking more bearish. Then we also have support at 516.5, our 20 EMA. This is also kind of aligning with the zone I have. That's our support zone. So it's kind of like a confluence of support. If we lose this, we lose 2 supports, the previous support and also the 20 EMA. If we lose 516, then we're going to be looking for a dip down to 515, eventually 513 below that. Those are going to be your levels on SPY. So what do I think is more probable in my personal opinion? Honestly, guys, I wouldn't be surprised if SPY kind of pushes a little bit higher, shuffles again, and then we eventually turn back down. If somehow it tries to break this high and we do get close to 520, then we could reject off that. But I see us rejecting eventually, right? I do see a rejection coming. I think that we are going to eventually see a little move to the downside very soon, just temporarily. I'm not saying we're crashing, just a little move, a little bit of a pullback, and I think that that is what could be coming. It's very probable that the high is already in and we're about to see this drop with this liquidity grab up here. So that could be what they were doing. They're grabbing liquidity here and they're getting ready for the move to the downside. That's very probable. But just to be safe, watch our 20 EMA and see if we hold 516.8 if we lose it or not. And that's going to be key for us. I'm going to talk about the VIX before I break down the QQQ and the others. The VIX is also looking bearish right now. But one thing that you will notice is that we've almost entirely filled this gap. So could the VIX dip a little bit more to about 13 before it starts to bounce after it fills this gap? It's very close. So that kind of tells me that the VIX could try to bounce soon. We could dip a little bit more than try to bounce, which shows that the market might kind of pop a bit more before it starts to make its move to the downside, because I think the VIX is going to bounce soon. That's my personal opinion. If you look at the daily on the VIX loves, and let me just go to the 4 hour just to show you, it loves to bounce off the 12 to 13 area. It loves doing that historically. We're approaching our support around 13. We're very close to it. So it could actually hit this then bounce. And if that's the case, this would lead the market to potentially rejecting. So watch for that very carefully if we get that move. Looking at the QQQ before I start talking about Tesla, I'm going to go back to the hourly time frame just to show you this. Notice how we had an imbalance. We just filled it and now we're at resistance. So our resistance is at 441 and also 442.25. We have support currently at 439.86. If we lose that, look for a dip to 439, then eventually lower levels all the way down towards about 437. That's going to be very, very key for the way that we're moving. But with that being said, this is resembling a head and shoulders. We struggled to really get past 442 on the QQQ, and we came just short of this resistance, which is where the previous high happened to be, but very close. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's very close anyways. So this suggests to me that the odds favor the downside as well. Just know what the resistance and support levels happen to be. And it might try to retest 441, kind of shuffle a little bit before it tries to make its way back down. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up testing 439 and eventually 437 very, very soon as the most likely possibility. But always look at resistance just to be safe. But I do favor downside a bit more. For Tesla, we're looking a little bit weak. So one thing worth noting about Tesla is we had a range. We have a tendency of breaking above support at 178 and holding it. We have resistance on 186, and we've been going back and forth for quite some time. And we ended up losing 178. So with that support breaking, there's going to be a risk of this potentially dipping all the way down towards about 175. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla actually comes down, to right here. If we lose 175, that's going to be what's key for Tesla. So it might pop tomorrow morning, come down to 175, and then kind of shuffle a bit. If we lose that, we're going to be dipping all the way down to fill the gap at 169. So there could be some downside coming for Tesla. Watch resistance at 179.9 and 181. Watch support at 175. If we lose that, look for a bigger dip, and that is the most likely possibility in my opinion. Once again, Tesla's going to likely dip, come down to at least 175, then lose that support possibly. That's the most likely possibility. For Nvda, I'm seeing something very similar developing. So I noticed that this is also starting to dip a little bit. It was trying to hold support. We have resistance currently at 906 and also 908. And we have support currently at 895, where our 50 EMA is. Lose that, and I can see 885 coming. With this imbalance down here, I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of pop a little bit and then make our way all the way down to about 885. So I favor the downside a bit more, and I find that to be very probable on Nvda. For a few more stocks out there, we have, let me just double check this. Aapl has resistance currently at about 183. This 183 zone is going to be our resistance. Our support is 181. If we lose that at the 50 EMA, we have 180 coming. I favor that this is actually going to end up dipping. We have like a left shoulder here. We have a head and maybe a right shoulder forming. So maybe a little pop and drop like move, or even a drop right here. So I find the drop to be a bit more probable. And I think that Aapl could actually dip all the way down to 180. So that is a strong possibility. So make sure you're prepared for that just to be safe. But with that being said, guys, that is it for the main five I typically talk about. That's Aapl, Nvda, Tesla, SPY, and the QQQ. Now I'm going to focus on the rest of the tickers, which are historically less popular, at least for my views and such. So we're going to look at the 4 hour time frame on Palantir. What do I see for the chart? For the 4 hour, we got a big rejection after earnings came out. So it's looking kind of weak right now. And I think that we could get a retest of this previous support becoming resistance, so like 21.65 before it continues lower. And I do see a move all the way down to at least 21 coming, and even lower levels than that as a strong possibility. For Super Micro, in my opinion, even though this was trying to form like a double bottom, we're starting to reject, and we do have a slanted head and shoulders like structure that's kind of developing. So to be bullish, you want to see it break past 850. It came just short of that. And then to be bearish, you want to see it basically lose support all the way down towards 800. If we lose 800, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down to lower levels. So I'll be breaking down more levels and more information about this. If 800 fails, it's going to be coming down to this imbalance at 750, and that's going to be very, very key for this stock. In my opinion, super micro, there's a slanted head and shoulders, and this could actually come all the way down to this imbalance at 754. So I do favor a potential rejection as a strong possibility, as it struggled to hit resistance and break through it. For Rivian right here has our 50 EMA at 9.58. If we lose this, we're going to be dipping all the way down to our previous resistance becoming support at 9.37. And if that fails, we're going to be dipping all the way down even lower. So I do favor more potential downside. I think that there's a very, very good chance that that is going to end up being the case. Could retest our 50 EMA again. It's because of earnings is actually down like 6% in the after hours. Look for a little bounce and a retest of this support. I do see it dipping a little bit more to at least 9.39 or lower. So there's a risk of downside, in my personal opinion. For SoFi, we came all the way up to our resistance. We did push to about 7.25. Now we're turning a little bit, so I do see a risk of it dipping a bit. The 4 hour is kind of turning right here. So I see this potentially coming all the way down towards this support at 6.89. So I favor that as the most likely possibility. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're also turning right here. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually retest the previous resistance becoming support, and we have a gap to fill simultaneously. So I think it's going to like pop and drop, or even drop all the way down to fill the gap to about 202. I find that to be a big possibility as soon as tomorrow or around that period within the next few days. For AMD, we're kind of turning right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we come down to fill this gap. I think that it might pop and then drop all the way down to 150. So I think that's a strong possibility. For ARM, we're also kind of contracting right over here. We're getting tighter, and I see a move potentially coming down to the 50 EMA to 104.24. So I do see that as a strong possibility. I think that we're going to likely dip a little bit, so we'll watch and see if that ends up being the case. For Coinbase, I just want to make it very clear that we could rebound a bit towards this 220 area, not 220, sorry, right here, this 215 area, then continue a little bit lower. I think it might shuffle a little bit. It's been range bound for now. And we still have an inverse head and shoulders that's kind of forming. We have like the left shoulder here and the head. So I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up here, comes all the way down to our support at this like the very low 200s, like 205, come back up and just trade sideways for some time before we get a breakout. But I do see a little pop and drop like move coming. We got a little rejection, a little rejection today, and the 4 hours looking weaker. So it might pop and then drop all the way down to 205, if not 200. For Amazon, I called 190 as a strong possibility. If you look at this, we did get up to 190 today, and now we kind of rejected here. We're starting to turn up here at resistance. So I wouldn't be surprised if we dip all the way down to about 185, retest the 20 EMA. Might come down first and try to bounce again, or it could even lose that support. But I see it coming down to at least 185 nonetheless. For Meta, I called 472. That's coming. That's exactly where we went to. That's where the high was. We'll have to see if it breaks this or not. If it rejects, we're coming back down to 460. If it breaks through this, we're going to pop a bit. But I favor that this is actually going to reject and such. For Microsoft is kind of turning right now. We have this range right here. We like to get bought up at 388. We tend to get rejected at about this 418 area. I think that this is kind of turning. I think we're going to be retesting 406, and I will have to watch and see what happens from here. So look for a little test of 406, a little rebound, and maybe a continuation lower, but that's going to be the most likely possibility. For Google's coming up right over here. We could be retesting resistance at about 174. And we'll see if this rejects or not. It could actually retrace towards 169 all over again. And we'll have to wait and see how things go from here. For the VIX is also dipping all the way down to fill this gap. So it is looking a little bit weak still, but we're super close to filling the gap. We're like 20 cents away, basically. So it could dip a little bit more right here and then try to rebound. So I wanted to make that very, very clear that this could dip a little bit more before it tries to get that bounce. So I think it could dip a bit more and then it's going to bounce because the market might kind of shuffle a bit and then eventually see a little pullback. I think that that might be coming. That's what the VIX is starting to show us, and that's a very, very strong possibility. For the 10-year Treasury yield, we're also looking a bit more bearish, but we ended up approaching this zone where we had previous resistance becoming support, and we're approaching it right over here. So 4.4 or that 4.4% area is where we're kind of like approaching. I wouldn't be surprised if we have these two gaps to fill above. Are we about to get a bounce on yields because of the Fed? We'll just have to wait and see. It still looks a little bit more bearish to me, though. I'm not seeing an official bounce. We're testing some support, but I'm not seeing a bounce yet on this. So we will see what this does. This is a little bit different, but I'm going to be a little bit patient with this one. For the dollar index, we're kind of turning right now. Watch the 50 EMA at 105. 47 as resistance. If the dollar breaks this, we're going to be pushing back up to this imbalance. So I do see 105.75 as a possibility. This could drag the market lower since we have a bullish divergence and a nice little balance that's kind of forming to fill this imbalance. So we will see how things go. With that being said, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Take care, everyone. I really appreciate every single one of you. I want the best for everyone out there when it comes to your trading and such. And just know that the market is trying to contract a bit and there is a risk of a rejection as a strong possibility. Do I think it's going to happen immediately? Not necessarily. We might actually shuffle a bit first, but there might be a move coming to the downside as a strong possibility for tomorrow and by Thursday. So get ready, guys. SPY may pop a little bit more, pump a bit, and then eventually slow down and start pushing down temporarily. Not saying it's going to be forever. It could just be a day or two, and then we'll see if we get a bounce later on or not. But that's the next move I just want to focus on for now. So be ready. Do what you have to do, guys. And I just want to say I appreciate you. Have a great night. Have a great evening, and peace out.